Thank everybody for joining us today for this presentation about invasive shothole borers. They are an invasive, non-native beetle that is attacking trees, and we will be talking about that today. I'm Randall Oliver. I'm the statewide communications coordinator for invasive shothole borers, and I'll be covering the basics on the pest as well as the fungal disease that accompanies it. And my co-host, Erin Andreatta, IRC's Invasive Species Program Manager, will discuss IRC's involvement with this pest. And I think most of you know me and know Erin, so rather than further introductions, I'll just get started with a brief history of some of the efforts to manage the stealthy tree-killing beetle and how those programs in my position came into being. So invasive shothole borers, which periodically in this presentation I will also refer to as ISHB, first appeared in California in 2003 at Whittier Narrows, which is one of the largest recreational areas in LA County. At the time, it was thought to be a much more benign, less problematic species of beetle, the T shothole borer. Similar name, but very different characteristics. The actual species, the polyphagous shothole borer, wasn't identified until 2012. And despite some pretty dramatic impacts in places like San Diego's Tijuana River Valley, where a second invasive shothole borer, the Kuroshio shothole borer, really devastated all the willows throughout that valley. And in the city of Long Beach, which lost several streets lined with trees, and also fairly rapid spread through multiple counties in Southern California, invasive shothole borers really didn't get much attention and funding until 2018, when Assembly Bill 2470 awarded $5 million to the California Invasive Species Advisory Committee in order to develop and execute an action plan to manage the beetles and to stop them from further spreading. So there were four components to the plan that they developed: research and technology development, survey detection and rapid response, green waste and firewood as pathways, and outreach and education, which is my area. So I was hired as communications coordinator in January of 2020. And a short time later, Brenda Edgell, one of my co-volunteers, who I believe is on this call, suggested that I should give a presentation to IRC volunteers. So it's only taken me a year and a half, but I've learned a lot in that time, and I'm ready to make the presentation, although not in person. So we might start with just talking about what invasive species are in general. So invasives can be plants or animals, and what defines them as invasives is that they are both non-native to their new habitat, and they're harmful to that habitat. That harm can be environmental, where they choke out native species. It could be economic, such as crop destruction, or it could be related to human or other animal health. Invasives also typically have some additional characteristics, such as naive hosts. Those are hosts that haven't developed a natural resistance to the invaders, a lack of natural enemies that can hold them in check. And as a result of those two factors, they have the ability to spread rapidly. Turning specifically now to the invasive shothole borers, let's begin by looking at the biology of the beetles and the fungus that they spread within the trees. The term invasive shothole borers is a common name, and it refers to two visually identical species of tiny ambrosia beetles. And that again is the polyphagous shothole borer and the Kuroshio shothole borer. And you can see just how small these beetles are. If you look at the picture, you can see there's a male and also a female beetle, and they're just a fraction of the size of this coin. Another perspective of this is that they're often compared to the size of a sesame seed. So very tiny little beetles, but they can do a huge amount of damage. The reason that they're called ambrosia beetles is because that rather than eat wood, both the adult beetles and the larvae feed on a fungus that they farm inside of their tunnels, which we call galleries. Those are tunnels that they bore into the trees. That's where they spend virtually their entire lifespan. So this is a diagram of the beetle's life cycle. If we start down in the lower left corner, we have a mated female beetle who carries the fungus spores on some pocket-like structures on the back of her head. So she leaves the gallery where she's been living her life and finds a suitable host tree. And this is one that would sustain both her offspring as well as the fungus that she's carrying with her. She bores into the tree and creates those tunnels or galleries. And in that process, she introduces the fungus to the tree. She lays her eggs, and at the same time, this fungus is spreading within the tree. The eggs hatch, the larvae come out, they feed exclusively on the fungus, as does she. Then there are many females typically and very few males in that grouping. And the siblings mate with each other inside the galleries, and the process begins all over again. Now, it's only the females that are capable of flight, and they are the ones that leave the galleries and may go and form additional galleries in the same tree, or they may find other trees where they can do that. And an interesting thing of note here, the beetles, the female beetles, generally, as I said before, when they leave the gallery, they typically have already mated at that point. But if they haven't mated, an unmated female can only produce male offspring. But what they do is they create their new gallery, they have the male offspring, and then they mate with that same offspring. And then they are capable of producing females. So it's kind of a crazy scenario there. As the fungus grows and spreads within the tree to the interior tissues, the tree responds by trying to compartmentalize the spread. And what happens is that process disrupts the tree's ability to move water and nutrients up and down its trunk and branches. And over time, that results in branch dieback and even the death of the tree. But one of the things that makes the shothole borers such a serious problem is that they can attack and reproduce in such a wide variety of trees. That includes, in California, 66 different species. Some of their favorites are popular landscape trees. In particular, the box elder. That's just like dessert for them. So if there are box elders in the area, that's always the first place we look to see if there's infestations. And others that are particularly attracted to them are sycamores and various willow trees. So this list here of 15 trees are the ones that are extremely susceptible to the invasive shothole borers and the fusarium fungus. But in total, again, there are 66 different trees that can be hosts for these beetles. So let's look at the distribution and the impact of this pest. This map is something that you can find on our website, www.ishb.org. and it shows confirmed infestations of invasive shothole borers. This is just a static image here, but if you go to the website, you can zoom in to see more detail, or you can move around on the map to see particular areas of interest. Invasive shothole borers have been confirmed in 7 Southern California and Central Coast counties, but it's probably capable of living and reproducing throughout most of the state, probably with the exception of some of the desert areas. It does seem to be spreading to the north and east, and counties throughout California have recently begun trapping programs to either confirm or to negatively confirm its presence. As noted earlier, female beetles can fly. Typically, they fly short distances, which is one way they spread, but they also can spread via infested green waste and firewood. And that's probably the way they spread greater distances, and is a reason that we encourage people not to ever move firewood. And if you have green waste, to dispose of it properly by running it through a shredder and not moving particularly infested material to other locations. These beetle populations can increase dramatically in a very short period. They can reach tens of thousands within just 6 or 7 generations, and that's with some pretty conservative assumptions in terms of how many of the beetles survive from each brood. So they do reproduce rapidly and spread rapidly. And as the trees become increasingly infested, they become hazards, as well as sources for beetles that can attack and colonize other trees. So when we see trees like these, which we call amplifier trees, we recognize that they generally are beyond being saved, and they just have to be removed as early as possible with a complete removal, cutting all the way down to the stump and stump grinding. This is an example of where this happened in mass. This was Laguna Niguel Regional Park back in 2016. You'd see over 500 trees were removed from that park. So what that illustrates, it's important to identify these kinds of threats before they get to that degree of severity. If you catch it early, you can monitor the problem, you can treat it with fairly conservative treatments, which I'll get into a little bit later, and you avoid having to remove this massive amounts of trees. So to identify infestations, especially early on, it's necessary to know what to look for, what the signs and symptoms may be, and what signs and symptoms may point to other pests and diseases, because there are others that cause similar types of things. The main sign of an infestation for invasive shothole borers is an active entry hole. And that hole is roughly the size of the tip of a medium ballpoint pen. So this first photo actually shows a female beetle in the entry hole, which is something that you do occasionally come across. Generally though, when we suspect a hole is invasive shothole borer, we shave off the outer bark layer and get a clearer picture of the hole that's underneath. And at that point, it's pretty clear that this is an invasive shothole borer hole. Some of the other signs and symptoms include staining, which is often dark and wet, frass, which is boring dust, sawdust, gumming, and sugar-like buildups. And these signs and symptoms vary with the different species of tree. And you can learn more about that on our website, which again is www.ishb.org. But it's important to remember that even if you see these various symptoms or signs, it isn't invasive shothole borer unless it has those distinctive entry holes. Again, about the tip size of a medium ballpoint pen. And as we saw earlier, while these beetles affect 66 trees that are found in California, they do have a strong attraction to certain tree species. So box elders are their favorite, sycamores and willows. So if we're looking for shothole borers out in the woods or in our urban forest, these are the trees where we begin our search. Other insects and diseases, as I said, may present similar signs and symptoms. This more benign fruit tree shothole borer produces larger holes. The western oak bark beetle has smaller holes, and it also has this kind of foamy excretion. And then there's the lesser shothole borer or pinhole borer. They create smaller holes, but otherwise have similar symptoms. So you can see here, this is the ISHB hole. You can see it's larger. It's the same shape, it's perfectly round, but it's probably twice as big as the hole from the pinhole borer. Now, most of these other pests aren't really considered as great of a threat because, one, they aren't invasives, and two, they generally only attack trees that are already stressed, diseased, or dying. And they also typically are far more selective in terms of the types of species of tree that they attack. When we do find beetles, we can visually confirm that they're invasive shothole borers. You can look at the distinctive body, the size of the beetle. It has kind of stubby antenna. So we can confirm just by looking at them that they're invasive shothole borers. What we can't do by looking at them is know if it's polyphagous shothole borer or Kuroshio shothole borer. And to do that, they have to do DNA analysis. That's generally not necessary to manage this pest because the way you treat and manage these beetles is the same regardless of what species it is. So not typically necessary to do a genetic ID on them for most purposes. The other way that we can tell what they are is from a wood tissue sample. So we carve into the tree around the entry hole. We go to a depth of up to 1/2 inch. You pull that out, and then we can send that off to be analyzed. Once identified, there's 3 areas of best management practices for this: monitoring, managing or treating, and then correctly disposing of any infested material. Regular monitoring is the most important of these 3 steps, and that includes visual inspection of the trees and can include trapping as well. Trapping can be very helpful in areas that are remote with difficult access. It's also useful for identifying the edge of infestation. Now, with some other insect pests, trapping is often one of the ways that you can eradicate the insect. That's not true of invasive shothole borers. And the reason for that is the mating cycle that I described earlier. So the beetles that come out of the galleries and are out seeking their new hosts, generally they've already mated. So with traps, typically what you do is you use some kind of a strong pheromone to attract the bug, and they come into the trap in large numbers and are killed. That doesn't work with these invasive shothole borers because they've already mated, they're not attracted to pheromones. So we actually use an organic lure with a product called quiciverol, and it has a mild attraction for this particular beetle. It can attract them within very short distances, but it doesn't attract over a long distance. So again, trapping is very useful for identifying areas where the beetles are present and the edge of infestation, but cannot be used as a control method. We use the visual inspections to evaluate the level of infestation. So we look at the low, which is less than 50 entry holes, and no observed dieback. Moderate would be 50 to 150 entry holes with no dieback. Heavy is more than 150 entry holes with no dieback, and severe is greater than 150 and with dieback observed. So these severe infestations are the amplifier trees that we mentioned earlier. If traps are used, they're typically deployed in the spring and the fall because that's when the beetles are likely to be flying. Traps may be either the Lindgren funnel traps, which you may have seen these. We have them in Irvine Regional Park and Whiting Ranch. And then more commonly, we use the elm leaf beetle panel trap. These are sticky traps. They're used because they have a much lower cost and lower maintenance requirements. When we are entering a management program for this pest, we only want to treat the infested trees. So we look closely for the signs and symptoms. We look for the beetles, we look for the other signs, the entry holes, and we evaluate the level of severity. For low to moderately infested trees, regular monitoring combined with branch removal and other pruning is usually all that's necessary. Chemical treatments also can be effective, but they have to be performed by a licensed professional and under very strict guidelines. They're not allowed in riparian or wilderness areas. You certainly would never see it on any IRC land. There's also various biological controls that are being researched and that appear really very promising, but it's probably not likely that they're going to be available in the near future. And as I noted before, the severely infested trees really are beyond saving. They should be removed as soon as possible. They pose hazards due to the beetles' tunneling activity and the branch dieback. So you can have falling limbs or even falling trunks, a danger to residents, homeowners, guests, hikers. So we really don't want these things around. They're also a source of infestation for other trees in the area. So we definitely want to get rid of them, followed by stump removal and grinding. And then the beetles can actually survive in downed wood. So wood needs to be chipped as small as possible. If you chip to 1 inch, which is difficult, that kills 99.9% of the beetles. Chipping to 3 inch kills 98%. So that is pretty effective as well. So we at least want to chip to 3 inches or less. It's actually the vibration of the chipper that kills most of the beetles, surprisingly. But better to chip less than 1 inch if possible. And solarization and composting can also be used to kill any remaining beetles. So that's the basics of the pest. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Erin, who will focus more on what IRC is doing in this area.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today and your interest in the Shothole borers. Before diving into the meat of the slides I've provided, I'll just want to give you a brief history about our management thus far. So the Irvine Ranch Conservancy began involvement in 2015 when staff began participating in meetings for the Southern California Committee for the California Forest Pest Council and the OC Task Force for Invasive Pests. So we kept up to date meeting with our partners and just discussing current issues, and that's where we first learned about the Shothole borer issue. From there, we continued our collaboration with our partners, and in January of 2016, we collaborated with partners from the University of California, Irvine, and conducted initial surveys. And from these surveys, the following maps, which you will see, were created depicting the infected trees, and they were produced and shared with our partners to inform them of our situation. And the data we collected through these surveys included what Randall mentioned earlier, the diameter breast height, the percent dieback, and the infestation level. which was determined by the number of new holes, and symptoms, the necrotic tissue, staining, sugary exit, and frass. So we continue this collaboration, and we continue the surveys. Every year we kind of grew our survey pool, and we're currently up to 424 trees in the city of Irvine and 22 in the city of Newport. So just to give you the current status, we typically do our surveys from September to October strategically. As Randall mentioned, that's the highest time of the year for their flight season, with the greatest likelihood of catching new infestation. And so like I just said, we've got 424 trees currently tagged. These include willows and sycamores. And of those 424 in the city of Irvine, 63 are actively infested, 350 are uninfested or show signs of an inactive infestation, which just means no new holes, and then 11 unconfirmed. Sometimes it's hard to tell whether a hole is new or not new. So moving on to the next slide, this shows you the current distribution of our infestation. This is zoomed out of all of our City of Irvine infestations, which include Quail Hill, Bommer, and Shady Canyon. And as you can see, the pattern is such that it follows the wetter areas, the lowest part of these canyons, where you find more of your riparian species, including the willows. And the following two slides are just a close-ups of Bommer, and then following that is Shady Canyon. And these maps also do include color coding showing you where the infested trees are, the non-infested trees are, and the undetermined trees are. In addition to the city of Irvine, we also manage the city of Newport's small infestation, where we annually monitor the Gully Reserve. We currently have 22 tagged trees, 17 of which are actively infested, 1 which is uninfested, and then 4 that are unconfirmed. And the following map shows you where those are located, again, right in the wettest, lowest part of the gully. So that's our current situation. We do have plans moving forward. Of course, we're going to maintain our current survey protocol, but also I'm currently in conversation with a partner from the UC Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources about strategic placement of the elm leaf beetle panel sticky traps, which Randall mentioned. And this is to help us inform management strategies and mitigate the spread of the infestation. So we're thinking about on the perimeter of some of these infestations to see if they are migrating in areas we do not survey as an indicator to maybe expand our survey areas. And also there are talks of placing some around Irvine Lake, where we currently don't have an infestation, but it might be an area that the species would like to thrive. So this is ongoing. We haven't made any decisions yet, but we will be putting out traps to help us in our fight against the Shothole borer. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. There will be volunteer opportunities moving forward, if not this survey season, definitely the next, as we create some protocols and trainings. There you go, trainings for all you volunteers. So stay tuned, and we'll get back to you when those are ready.
So if anybody has any questions, happy to answer them.
I wonder, you know how sometimes the cities they'll say, oh, we've got free compost, we'll deliver to you. And I almost wonder sometimes, like, does that end up spreading a lot of this? You know, I don't know where that comes from, how hot the compost pile is that they take it from. But I know a lot of people have gotten free compost delivered that way from from Newport, from other different cities. I just wonder how that.
It is definitely a point of concern. You should never buy compost unless you know exactly where it's coming from. That's generally not a good thing to do.
Yeah, this is Tom Burrows. I have a question. So I thought we were going to focus and I didn't really look at the introduction. I thought we were going to focus on the gold spotted oak borer beetle, which is the one that's really affecting the IRC in Weir Canyon. And
Right.
I'm just curious, could give us an, I have a little printout here, which is probably 2 years old. Could you give us an update on how many trees have been removed and how many are being treated? Does anybody have that info?
I can speak to that.
Oh, okay, good, Erin.
Yeah, I can answer all those questions for you. Yes, so we are seeing tremendous success with our treatments. We have completed 5 years of treatment, and each year we have less new infested trees. So we currently have roughly 600 trees tagged, only 3 of which showed any signs of new infestation. And we are treating we treated 2,700 trees this year, just a buffer around the heart of the infestation as a preventative measure. So we could not ask for better results, and we are hopeful it's part of our management strategy and not just the fact there's been fire out there, there's drought out there, but we have been finding dead beetles in the exit holes, which is a good sign that our management is working directly. So I hope that answered all your questions. If not, please throw another one at me, but things are looking really good out there.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, that's
You're very
excellent.
welcome.
Okay, Jill Dale asks, is this the same borer that attacks stressed peach trees?
No, it's not. That would be the species that we mentioned earlier, the fruit tree shothole borer. That's not considered an invasive shothole borer.
And Dave asks, has anyone tested the effect of targeting castor bean on the spread of the beetles? Seems like an opportunity for 2 birds, 1 stone.
That's a great question, Dave. Additional reason to get rid of castor bean. I know we try to remove it wherever we can find it, but castor bean is on that list of the top trees that can become infested. And if you remember that the very first slide that showed a picture of all the galleries going through, that was castor bean. So there's lots of reasons to get rid of it. If IRC can do whatever they can to get rid of that's a big help.
David is on our radar, so when we see castor bean in our infestation areas, we do keep our eye out and we do check them. So thank you for that question.
Is there active monitoring going on in the north part of the landmarks? But if there are some sticky traps there in any of the canyons that we manage, maybe the volunteers might see those traps out there.
I can speak to that. We don't currently have traps out there. However, we do opportunistically check on trees that have suspected shothole borer. I can tell you Isaac was out there a week ago looking at some suspect trees and confirmed we did not have shothole borer. The holes were suspicious, but they came back negative. So we're always on the lookout for it, but we don't currently have a designated specific survey plan in the north.
One question I think I had was, we talked a little bit about you had a survey program that you have done in the past with other groups, and it would be nice to in the future have a volunteer opportunity to do something like that on the landmarks. And is that something that we might be able to do in the future?
That's a really good point, Erica. So I work for Dr. Beatrice Noboa-Berman, and she's done a lot of work on invasive shothole borers, probably locally the top expert on this. She and John Kabashima, who's another professor with UCA&R emeritus. And Dr. Noboa-Berman has done a couple of participatory science projects. One working with the RCD of the Santa Monica Mountains, where they're going out and using iNaturalist to identify shothole borer infestations and report them. She's done a similar project recently with the California naturalists and 4-H groups here in Orange County. And with the latter project, her goal was to try to see how accurate reporting is from participatory science projects. And she actually got very strong results, 85% accuracy. So very pleased with that. A part of both of those programs was some pretty extensive training. So what we just went through is kind of a very basic introduction. There is a course online at ishb.org that is more comprehensive than what we've discussed here. And that's part of the training that they went through. And then they actually had some additional workshops and had the groups go out and train in the field where they're actually going and finding examples of the Shothole bore holes or the various signs and symptoms so that they could recognize them later on.
Wow.
So
there's a field portion in it.
Exactly. So we're interested in doing more programs like that. The only, I guess, limitation on it would be that if we were to do that with IRC or with any other group, we have to have that same level and maybe even more training involved with it. And I know Erin has said that she's interested in that type of approach also.
Yeah, you'd want it to be accurate, just as
Right.
accurate.
Julie, did you want to say anything more about that project with the Santa Monica Mountains?
The iNaturalist Ventura in Los Angeles County's Bad Beetle project is very intensive. It's a 4-part training, and all participants are required to take and pass all the trainings, and actually only the first part of the training is a pass fail, because the rest you just show up and learn. But it's the online course that Randall described, which is the pass fail. That's step 1. Step 2 is an in-person training. It's a very technical training, and it does include both shothole borers and gold-spotted oak borer. And although fortunately in the area where the trainings are occurring right now in Ventura and Los Angeles counties, there's only one relatively small shothole borer infestation, and it's in a remote area and it has been contained. So it's not conducive for a training. But and then the third part of the training is a field practicum where people have the background knowledge from the online training, and then they have the field instruction, and then they come out and learn and practice with their handheld devices to search for and post any observations. I will add that we do have an quote unquote old school component to this training for people who are uncomfortable with or don't have a handheld device. So anyone can participate in this, and the old school component is we give them reporting sheets, and then the people working on the project enter the data for them. And the fourth part of the training is a virtual office hour where we go over the observations posted during the field practicum, and Dr. Nobua Berman looks at all the posts, and she'll discuss what she sees photographically and gives her opinion about that, and answer students' questions. It's gaining popularity, and as Randall said, it's very effective to have such a high level of efficacy in reporting.
Yeah, I think it's similar, Randall, to like our raptor training or like our gold spotted oak borer training. Thank you so much taking the time to join with Randall and making sure that we were able to describe the relationship and how we partner on these things and how we can move forward. And I really appreciate all the time that you guys spent to be able to share all your information. It's great. And then hopefully we can follow up with this and be able to do more partnership work with the volunteers' help. And then maybe do some more summary work and see how this is all going in another year or so, and see how the work helps the different areas on the landmark